Professor Vani, Mr. Wajahat Habibullah, the Minister of State, Mr. Rawat, Professor Hakim, and all the other very distinguished people on the dais, and the distinguished members of the audience, I am particularly grateful to the Institute of Objective Studies for having honored me today. I am overwhelmed. But as Professor Vani had said, I have had and still have a soft spot for the minorities, and because I think that without, in a sense, as Mr. Habibullah has said, that it is really all of us are, in a sense, minorities in some sense or the others. We are, as a woman, you are discriminated against. So in some way or the other, maybe a linguistic, maybe religion, but there is no doubt about it that the minorities in India, when we speak about minority, normally we speak about the Muslim community. And that that is why when the Constitution was framed and accepted in 1950, it was, we did it in the background of a very, very cruel partition, as was mentioned earlier, in which religion for the first time became associated with politics. And I think that lies at the root of the problem in this country, that religion has become associated with politics. As far as the Constitution is concerned, when it was framed, the framers represented not only the various regions in India, but they also included people from every religion. And so that every point of view was in there, and it was to set up a constitution which would guarantee a one nation unity as opposed to the two nation theory, that it was constitutionally provided that the state would have no religion whatsoever. It would be religiously neutral. But at the same time, the individual would have the right to profess, practice, and propagate his or her religion. In other words, India was set up as a secular state. It is true that the word secular was brought into the Constitution only by the 42nd Amendment, but this was at the background of the framing of the Constitution. It is not a new idea. As was said by the previous speaker, that secularism was always there because India was always a pluralistic society. In fact, according to Professor Amartya Sen, the idea of secularism found its foundation was laid by Akbar when he said that the state shall not interfere with a person's belief. That secularism is tried to be preserved today, and it can only be preserved provided we uphold the very basis of the secularistic approach, and that is equality. Equality does not mean that everyone is treated on par. Equality means that those who are in a disadvantaged position, whether by reason of numbers or by reason of social disadvantage or an economic disadvantage, are raised up so that they can operate on a common playing field, a level playing ground, as we call it. Now, the idea of secularism, as I said, means that the state must remain religiously neutral. But being religiously neutral does not mean that the state does not interfere with things which are religious, as, for example, in France, they do not allow any religious representation whatsoever. You cannot wear Muslims cannot wear veils, the Sikhs cannot wear turbans, and indeed the Christians cannot wear crosses. But as far as India is concerned, that we don't have this exclusive neutrality, we have an open neutrality. So, for example, we allow everyone to do whatever their religion wants. That is true secularism, I feel. That is an inclusive secularism which we have in this country, which is unique to this country, and perhaps because of our history of living together that we have got. So that we have public holidays which may be Eid, it may be Guru Nanak's birthday, it may be Mahavir Jayanti, it may be Janmashtami, or it may be Christmas. But we celebrate every religion. So it is not that the religion is kept separately, but it is a very inclusive growth. We celebrate our togetherness, we celebrate our differences. But the question remains, and I will just briefly outline what I feel has been a very informative and a very exciting session today, is that who is responsible for keeping this idea of secularism in this country alive, making us this very unique country that we are. The first, of course, is the state, and as has been very generously acknowledged by the Honorable Minister, he says that of course it is the state, it is for the state to propound the laws, it is for the state to propound policies, to set up commissions, and to generally see that disputes are not there. But there is one aspect of the state which is more responsible, the other second, and that is the judiciary. You need an impartial, detached, dispassionate judiciary without whom the promise of equality cannot be seen, cannot be realized. The third is the people who are in fact implementing the laws. And as was said by the Honorable Chairperson just before me, that they find this institutionalized bias amongst the bureaucracy and amongst the police. And it is the implementation, whatever good laws you may make, 100 good laws are there as far as India is concerned, but it is in the implementation of those laws that there is an institutional prejudice. And that institutional prejudice must be overcome, particularly in the police. The old Police Act, which was enacted in 1861, was enacted by the British immediately after the 1857 revolution, because they wanted the police to be an arm, of a political arm, to suppress the Indians. Unfortunately for us, 60 years after independence, we keep the very same 1861 Act by which the government in power uses the police to suppress whoever is not in power. So therefore, 7 police commissions have been set up to recommend that please realize that India is now independent, make the police separate from the politicians. Do not have political interference with the police, because the very police who you are utilizing today, the next party who will come into power will use the very same police against you. So it must be an autonomous and independent body. Of course there will be supervision, but it must have independence from political interference. Unfortunately, despite the Supreme Court passing a judgment on this basis, it has not been done, and the police continues to be a political tool, and whatever suits the politician of today will be done. The next lot of people is to a certain extent the media. But finally, I would say that the persons who are most responsible for upholding the values of secularism is the majority. It is for the majority in the country to, in fact, fulfill the trust which was spoken of, that they said, trust us. Now it is for the majority to ensure that trust is given. Because the minority, by virtue of the smallness of the number in a democratic setup, will never be able to really express itself. It is true that we have 28 states and 7 union territories in which you have 2 which majority are Muslims, and 3 where the majority are Christians, and 1 where there's majority of Punjabis. But even within those states, it is for the majority in every state to see to it that the minorities are protected. Ultimately, it is their responsibility. Because unless the majority take upon themselves the responsibility in the ultimate analysis, this country cannot progress at all. So I will end with this. I know that a lot of things have been said today. If there is one thing that I will take back with me, is that it has, in some stories which I have heard today, I have felt an anger that I cannot do anything about it. If I were a judge, I could have done something about it. But sometimes I thought to myself, what can one do about it? It is unjust when people are detained. What happens to these young boys? What is the psychological trauma that they are faced with for the rest of their lives, when they have, for no reason or no fault of their own, but merely because they happen to have a particular name, been detained in that fashion? If they deal with me in that fashion in the United States, I can say, well, that's all right. I won't go to the United States. If they deal badly with me in United Kingdom, I won't go to the United Kingdom. But what do you do when they deal badly with you in your own home? Where do I go? So it is for us, as I said. Then I thought to myself, no, that is right. I may not be a judge, but I will use whatever I can and however I can to see to it that these injustices are not perpetrated, not as a judge, but as a citizen of this country. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.